Thank you, Speaker. I rise to make a brief contribution on the Electoral Legislation Amendment Elections Bill 2026. And whilst this bill deals with a number of aspects in relation to amending both the Electoral Funding Act, the Electoral Act 2017, and also the Electoral Funding Act, the two areas that I wanted to specifically mention are in relation to integrity in our electoral system and in our democracy, and specifically the sections of the Act which deal with postal voting and some practices where candidates have used the goodwill of voters to take advantage of the fact they feel they're being assisted with postal voting when instead they are actually building their database. So I wanted to particularly mention those because I've seen that in action, and I think the average person who receives from a candidate a letter in the mail indicating that they're eligible or able to vote early, and to do so, fill out these forms and then send them back to the member's office or the candidate's office, rather than actually directly to the Electoral Commission, is something that is taking advantage of voters. And through that process, they're not actually aware that by doing that, they're giving their details to be used for purposes in the future, I suppose, for marketing. So I think that's a very good, positive step that this bill brings. And most importantly, finally addressing truth in political advertising. And whilst this bill doesn't go as far as I think maybe that we could get, it's definitely a step in the right direction, particularly in regards to the two sections that have been spoken about a lot in previous members' speeches in relation to the digital creation of advertising material. In terms of how this bill is drafted and where improvements could be made in the future, although I'm not moving amendments today, I suppose is the context of the digital creation, and we are living in a world of AI, and we're living also in a world where our democracy is under attack from misinformation. And whilst this bill here today deals with digital creation, another way to look at it, and I'll refer to some other jurisdictions in a moment, is also looking at the concept of misleading and deceptive conduct. And that comes from the premise of how businesses are not able to engage in misleading, deceptive conduct. And arguably, in elections, we should not seek to mislead or deceive voters either. There have been previous bills, one put in federal parliament called the Stop the Lies Bill, which seeks to address misleading and deceptive conduct in relation to elections by provisions that read very similarly to those required of business. And then there have also been legislation in state parliaments, the ACT, but also in South Australia. So in South Australia, we know that since the 1980s, they've had truth in political advertising. Section 113 of the South Australia's Electoral Act makes it an offence to authorise or cause to be published electoral advertisements that are materially inaccurate and misleading, and that the Commissioner can request advertisements to be withdrawn if required. I think also significantly with that piece of legislation is that the Court of Disputed Returns can actually invalidate the results of an election on the grounds of misleading advertising as well. So there are examples in other jurisdictions where protecting voters' rights to have and to be informed with accurate information have gone further than the bill before us. But this is a very important bill in terms of the fact that it does introduce this requirement to try and safeguard against the use of digital systems and digital advertising to protect voters from misleading information and to protect candidates as well from their image and likeness being used in situations or acts which is not representative of what has actually happened in reality. I do think that we are at a stage, and we're seeing this play out now, a time where populism, short sound bites, social media, and a lack of information generally is seeking, and distrust in governments and also institutions, is seeking to erode the amazing democracy that we have, not just in New South Wales, but across Australia. So I do welcome this bill, the amendments to some of the amendments to this bill, which will be spoken about later, but particularly wanted to call out those which make the power of voters to make informed decisions stronger, and the power of voters to not have their information procured from them in those circumstances that I mentioned earlier in relation to postal voting. So I do believe that this bill does strengthen our democracy. It strengthens truth in political advertising, and I believe it's a very, very good first step, but more to do. I commend the bill to the House.